liminal space between dreams and consciousness, a world of possibility unfolded for Daniel. He was a factory worker, living a quiet life that found its escape in the vivid landscapes of his dreams. For as long as he could remember, Daniel had been blessed with an incredible degree of lucidity as he slept, allowing him to traverse the world inside his mind. His wife, Claire, was the sole confidant of his nightly voyages, the only one to share the mysteries he uncovered while the rest of the world slumbered. And Claire was absolutely fascinated. Over breakfast, Daniel narrated the latest chapter of his nocturnal journey to Claire. A peculiar pattern had been emerging in recent weeks, a connection between his dreams and the waking world that was too coincidental to ignore. Claire's brown eyes gleamed with a curiosity that mirrored his own as he recounted the details of his latest dream. As Daniel spoke, he watched Claire, captivated by the spark of inspiration in her gaze. Her words unveiled a tantalizing possibility that his dreams were more than they seemed, that perhaps they held glimpses of truths yet to unfold. Daniel relayed the specifics of his dream, recounting the tale of a small, remote log cabin in the 1800s. The intimidating image of a man with long white hair and a black coat was etched into his memory. The man lived there at the cabin with his wife Marianne. She referred to him as Zebediah, or Zeb. A leather-bound book bearing a delicate bird engraving on the cover was placed on a table by their bed. Daniel couldn't explain why, but the book felt important. Daniel had watched this man leaving the cabin, noting that Zebediah had on his belt a holstered revolver and a simple butcher knife. Despite this being only a dream, the last thing Daniel wanted was to attract the attention of this character. The location quickly phased from the cabin to the busy street of a small town. Daniel stood at the corner of a general store, continuing to watch Zeb, who now stood across the street talking to two other men. He tried his best to make out what they were saying, but their voices were drowned out by the sounds of horses and carriages. He did note that a sign across the street read, "Morning Glory Barber Shop." Was Morning Glory the name of the town? He looked back at Zeb, who was now looking directly at him. It was a sensation of terror at that moment which had pulled Daniel back to the waking world. Claire remained captivated throughout the recounting of his dream, but Daniel was unsettled and she could see it. "Let's not talk about it anymore," she said. "Hey, it's date night. Where you want to go?" "Anywhere, babe," he said. Over the course of the day, it was increasingly difficult for Daniel to concentrate on his work. The lines between reality and dreams began to blur, as events from various recent dreams weaved their way into his waking world. The whispers of conversations, the flicker of familiar faces, all seemed to converge in an uncanny symphony. For whatever reason, he felt that Zeb, a name that resonated with a sense of foreboding, was at the center of this enigma. And that night, after kissing his wife and telling her goodnight, he found himself back in the dream world. Only this time he was in a more modern time, standing in a city park. He immediately recognized it as the nearby city of Hope's Gate, a place that often played a pivotal role in Daniel's dreams. A shroud of darkness fell over the city. A little girl appeared before him, looking up at him curiously. She looked to be around 8 or 9 years old, with long brown hair and a fishtail braid. "Are you real?" she asked. "Are you?" he responded. She turned her gaze to a small bird, a finch, which was perched on the back of a park bench. Her words carried a weight that extended beyond their meaning. "Watch the finch," she said, stressing the importance of this task. Before he could ask her why, the scene morphed, transporting Daniel to the heart of the city, where silence reigned and darkness held dominion. Amidst the shadows, Zeb emerged, his figure a sinister silhouette against the night's canvas. Hidden behind a car, Daniel observed as Zeb strode down the deserted street, accompanied by an entourage of ethereal shadows. Laughter tinged with malevolence reverberated through the air, leaving Daniel paralyzed with fear. In the dream world, one rule had guided Daniel: never reveal his true nature as a dreamer to its inhabitants. But Zeb was proving to be more than another soulless creation of Daniel's mind. Zeb stopped before passing Daniel's hiding place. The army of shadows followed suit, their laughter ceasing. Silence permeated the scene, and then Zeb turned to Daniel, peeking from behind the car. His piercing eyes fixated on him once more, the boundary between dreamer and dream dissolving. Zeb raised a hand toward Daniel and extended his long index finger. The shadows began to shriek and move in Daniel's direction. Panic surged within Daniel as they converged, and a chase ensued, with Daniel fleeing the pursuing darkness, guided by sheer instinct. He lifted his feet and allowed himself to rise into the air, flying much faster than he could run. But the shadows were still on him, clutching at his ankles with black, smoky hands. Struggling against them, he mustered every ounce of his willpower to try to wake up, but instead he only managed to force himself away from the city. He disappeared into a cloud, re-emerging from the other side, and now found himself hovering above the familiar log cabin from the night before. He had gone back in time again. Zeb and his army were nowhere to be seen, but Daniel's dread remained. Seeing no other recourse, he sought refuge in the cabin. Its interior offered an unexpected encounter with Zeb's wife, Marianne, her anguished countenance showing the weight of her sorrow. Clutching the leather-bound book adorned with the bird's image, she murmured, "I thought I knew him. He warned me never to read it, but I couldn't resist." She held out the book to Daniel, her eyes beseeching him, urging him to unlock the answers within. Opening the book, Daniel was met with cryptic passages that teased at deeper truths. It was overwhelming, more information than he could quickly take in, much less understand. "What you need is in there," she said. "Zebediah has to be stopped." Daniel flipped through one page after another, aware of how typically impossible it is to read it all in a dream, and yet the words themselves were clearly written. It was their meaning that he struggled to comprehend. Marianne suddenly implored him with a sense of urgency, "He's coming, you have to wake up." Daniel heard the front door handle begin to turn. He clenched his eyes tightly, determined to see the waking world when he opened them again. But a hand fell hard on Daniel's shoulder. He turned to see the horrible face of Zebediah, wickedly grinning with crooked yellow teeth.
"You're not going anywhere, boy."
With a start, Daniel jolted awake, liberated from the clutches of the nightmare's embrace. Claire was sitting upright, seemingly lost in thought herself. Daniel's words, charged with an urgency of their own, tumbled forth as he quickly began to recount the enigmatic events that had unfolded within his dreamscape. But something was wrong. His words fell upon deaf ears, for Claire's presence remained vacant and unresponsive. "Claire?" said Daniel. "Claire, what's wrong?" But she said nothing, her once gleaming eyes now empty and soulless. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her lightly at first and then more aggressively. He called out her name again and again, but Claire wasn't in there. Not with Daniel, not really. In the waking world, Claire sat within the sterile walls of a quiet hospital room by the bedside of her husband. In reality, it was Daniel who was unresponsive, lost somewhere inside his own mind, unable to wake. Claire's sister Olivia softly knocked at the door and pushed it open. Claire greeted her with a hug at the foot of Daniel's bed. "It's been 5 days," said Claire, tears welling up in her eyes. "I miss him. He's right here in front of me, and I'm just sitting here, missing him." But Daniel wasn't there. Not with Claire. Not really. The dichotomy between dream and reality had turned upon itself, ensnaring Daniel in a paradox. Claire's presence, steadfast at his bedside, cast a poignant contrast against his silent form. In the prison of his mind, he had somehow found himself outside of his house, having lost sight of Claire. He knew he needed to look for her, but he couldn't remember why. For the first time in his life, lucidity had evaded him. He set out into this boundless world with an intense feeling of uncertainty. And as the days drifted by, Daniel remained trapped. A cruel twist of fate had robbed him of his conscious awareness within the dreamscape, a realm which had always felt like a second home. Irony coiled around him as he navigated his own subconscious. Unaware of his own plight, a dreamer trapped within his dreams, mistaking his imagined reality for the waking world. As he trotted along, a finch fluttered down and settled on top of a nearby car. Daniel and the bird watched each other for a few moments before the finch took flight again. And where the bird flew, Daniel followed.